Hate when that happens.
The interface change. Hello, ladies and gents. Thanks again for being a part of our show. This is now unbelievably the ninth year of Noggin Notes, which I still can't wrap my head around. But today we have Leslie Elliott Boyce with us. She is a coach and a consultant, even though neither one of us like those words, but that's what we've adopted for now. But she's got a much more colorful history than merely coach and consultant, and I'm going to let her take it away at this point. Leslie, good morning. Hi.
Hi, Jake. It's nice to see you today. Gosh, I
Likewise.
don't know what to say about my colorful history. It's too colorful to enumerate quickly.
Uh, let's start with how you ended up in the therapy adjacent field. How about that?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I thought about that. I guess I don't know how long a story to make that. I When I was younger, I was in college. I was a little bit late, non-traditional student. I was in my 20s already, my kind of mid to late 20s. And I had planned on going to law school. And when I went to the academic counseling office there, they were like, they said you to go pre-law, you can go pre-law or you can just get a writing intensive undergrad. And here's a couple of options. One of them was psychology. I thought that sounds interesting. And so I'll do that. But I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the study of psychology so much that by the time that was at a community college, I transferred to university. I was in the psych program there and I applied for a research fellowship and I got it. And I was working really closely with the chair of the psych department and other faculty doing my research and my stats and stuff. And I started to think really seriously about going into that profession. That university had a clinical psychology department. That's where I was. And they had a counseling department, counseling psychology. The clinical psych, it was interesting to see at that time, and I don't know how things have evolved since. I have a sense of it, but at that point, it seemed like there was a real schism between the clinical psych and the counseling psych people. I didn't really like some elements of the clinical stuff. I mean, research was interesting, but I think my real interest was in working one-on-one with people. So I started to think about maybe I won't go to law school, maybe I'll go into counseling. And this was roundly poo-pooed by the faculty that I was working with. It was like, oh, that's just like woo. That's not real. If you want to go into psychology, you need to go clinical psych. So I started looking at it. I thought about going into a graduate program for clinical psychology, either a PsyD or a PhD with master's in progress. And I kind of started building towards that. And I remember I was just on the fence for a couple of years. It felt like I was really straddling this line of do I want to go into this graduate program or do I want to go to law school like I've been planning? I ended up going to law school and it was my whole first year. I was like, I should have gone into counseling. I should have gone into. So I dropped out in my second year, and I ended up having a couple of kids before I went back. But I went back into a counseling program, and the appeal for me there was a similar appeal, law and psychology. Both were helping people solve problems, and what I found that I really liked, the thing that turned me off about law was the same thing that turned me off about clinical psych. It was a bunch of paperwork, it was a bunch of writing, it was a bunch of research, it was very little in-person interface with people. I just liked the earthiness, the directness of working one-on-one with someone. And after a while I thought, I think I don't care so much about what the stuffy academics think about this. What I want to do is actually work as a counselor. So I went to graduate school for counseling in 2019. And that's another story all in itself. But I don't work as a licensed counselor. I work as a coach.
Yeah. You went blurry. If you wouldn't mind like tilting
Oh,
it back and
yeah,
forth,
I've
maybe
got a
there we go.
dumb camera problem. So tell me if it does that.
Mine
I'll
does.
mess with
Mine
it.
does the same thing. It's all right. This probably, I mean, I don't know if it's going to go on YouTube or not. We just uploaded like a zillion of our podcasts to YouTube.
Hmm.
And so if you're listening and you want to go to YouTube and watch what these people look like, you can now. We started doing that, no, probably 5 years ago, whenever the world ended and we all went to Zoom. But anyway, back to back to the
No,
interview.
I think my camera problem is that it's kind of a dark room. I'm backlit by this window. I literally have
Yeah.
one, two, three, four, five lights and a string of lights in front of me
Wow.
trying to get the right amount of light, and it's not
You've
quite
really
working.
committed
So
yourself to this.
I
I
well, I'm trying to
mean,
go
we'll get
no
into that too.
LED. So anyway,
Oh yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Gosh, that's so hard too.
yeah.
Um, anyway, so okay, so maybe for context here, I'm going to give my explanation of what I think clinical psych is, and then you can nod or shake your head. These days, clinical psychology. No, I'm going to back up. I'm going to define the term. So, psyche, which is the root of that word, psyche is the Greek goddess of the human soul. So, ology being the study of something, it's psychology. Psychology is the study of the human soul, or at least it used to be. These days, we translate it more to be the study of human behavior, which is not a terrible thing. It's linguistically inaccurate, but it's not a bad thing. And what you're describing there, from my understanding, and I didn't go to school for it, I just know enough psychologists to know. Typically, they don't do therapy as we think of it, the talking and the digging around and the rooting into the soul or the mind, if you will. They often do what you describe as paperwork, which is a lot of they administer a battery of diagnostic tests to find out how you tick. And again, that has its place. I'm not poo-pooing that at all. But it's definitely not talk therapy. So if you're going into clinical psychology, you are either going to be you might be working with people administering these psychometric tests, or you might be in research, which is also has its utility. But you're probably not doing therapy like we think of yesteryear psychologists or
Mhm.
psychiatrists. Psychiatrists of yesteryear used to do talk therapy. You know, think of the old Sigmund Freud image of a person laying down on the couch and so forth. We don't really do that anymore. But these days, psychiatry often is medication management, very little talking. Psychology is a lot of testing and research, not a lot of talking. And then therapy, which is the counselor therapist realm, is the talking. Does that track with what they were teaching these days, or did they actually teach therapy also?
Let's see, therapy also. Well, I find that I don't know if this is going to answer the question directly, but it's interesting. When I went back to school, so I had not been in school since about 2010, and then I went to graduate school in 2019. So I got my undergraduate degree in 2008. So that's 11 years gap between my my contact with this identity confusion in the
Right.
psychology field. This counseling is over here and clinical psych is over here. Then I went back in 2019 and suddenly all the counseling programs were clinical mental health counseling programs. And so you
Yeah.
saw this clinical thing get attached to them. So it's an applied psychology field, but now it's clinical. And a lot of what we were taught in my program was the same kind of assessments, check boxes, this kind of paperwork stuff. Therapy also, a lot of behavioral therapy, a lot of CBT, stuff like
Yeah.
that. So the sort of talk therapy, the art of the soul is kind of getting squeezed out. I'm not sure if that answers what you were looking for, though.
You know what, sort of. I was asking specifically about the clinical psych program, but you
Oh.
bring up a really good point. So was that yes to the clinical psych program? They don't
The
really
clinical
teach
psych
therapy,
program, no therapy at all. No, they didn't
right?
talk about it at all. But this was again, I was in an undergrad program. I did take a couple of classes with the master's program in clinical psych at my undergrad, just because I had transferred in a bunch of stuff from community college that wasn't accepted.
Right.
And the my mentor took pity on me and she said, if you want more interesting stuff, instead of just taking it again at the undergrad level, you can take it with the master's students. So I got a little bit, but I heard nothing about therapy. They did industrial organizational psychology, which is a lot of like helping people in
Hmm.
workplaces. And yeah, so it wasn't there. We didn't even come close to touching on therapy in that program.
That does answer the question, and I I think it's worth noting because this is one of my I don't know issues with where I have heartburn is that you mentioned the clinical mental health. Clinical mental health for the unknowing audience, and maybe even for the knowing audience, there's basically two tracks that you can take. They're not either social work or psychology. Social work will train you sort of to be a therapist, but also not really. They're more systems oriented around resource building for the individual, and clinical psych we've already discussed. So in the therapy quote unquote track, you've got two options: clinical mental health, which is what you described, and then marital family couple. And I'm not going to get into the whole accreditation thing, but the point is that marital family couple tends to be more of the slower plodding exploration of the individual. Clinical mental health, you're right, it does center on behaviorism quite a bit. And what's important there, from my view, I went to grad school the first time for educational leadership in 2006 to '08, and I took some therapy class, some counseling classes because I was fascinated by it. And I thought, well, if I'm going to be a college student advisor, I should probably understand a little bit of this counseling thing. And loved it, fell in love with it. Graduated, terrible economy, 2008. Worked a few Joe jobs, did some in-home stuff, paratherapy, we might call it. But then re-enrolled in 2010. So roughly the same time that you would have been an undergrad. And back then we were taught the depth work of the human soul, the human psyche, the human mind. We can interchange those. It's fine. There's hairs to be split. But nowadays, what I'm seeing emerge from the schools, and it's 16 years later, is more behaviorist focused. So we're focusing on how to change someone's behaviors, someone's thoughts about the behaviors, the undesirable things that they're going on in their life. And we're really not getting to the root of the emergence of the problematic behavior. We're just treating the behavior. So my vocabulary says we separate symptoms from problems. The problems almost never get addressed anymore in the grad schools. The symptoms do. And that's fine, but it's incomplete in my estimation. You, I don't know if you have that perspective. Did you straddle that enough to see the difference between the depth of the work versus the treatment of the symptoms?
I think I noticed that there was a shallowness in the teaching across the board. I don't know if I at the time would have identified it as being because of the
Okay.
behaviorism bias in the work. What really struck me when I was in my counseling program was the way that the social justice sort of social engineering ideology was laid so heavily over everything that we were doing that it seemed to remove a lot of the depth from the work,
Right.
from the education. It very much felt, and I think I used this word the other day when we were talking for solid ground, like a mill.
Yeah.
It was just it was kind of a degree mill. We were doing very shallow work, and it was so shallow. Like some of this you wouldn't have put eighth graders through this. The kind of writing the addressing model on the board and telling us that we're supposed to, I've talked about this ad infinitum, so I don't know if that's an interesting thing to get into, but
It,
the social
yeah.
justice stuff really eclipsed a lot of the depth. That said, I did have a couple of really good professors. I had a very good group counseling class, and I had a very good counseling skills professor who did get to the depth of stuff. He did get into how to do that. I wish I could have just taken a whole program with that guy and studied how he does his work. I think something that was more of a mentorship opportunity was someone who does really deep work with people that gets to, like you said, the source of what's going on for this individual would have been infinitely more valuable than the kind of surface level stuff we did. But I don't know if I was able to identify that behaviorism specifically was the problem. There were so many problems.
That's a great way of putting it, and I do want to get into this because this is largely why I wanted you on the podcast because we have not really addressed this. We had Ryan Rogers on some time ago. I know you know Ryan,
Mhm.
and Ryan has done less than eighth grade things in his grad program. He talked about
Yeah.
doing construction paper
Uh,
artwork, collages, which eighth graders would not do. Third graders do that kind of things. I know because I have a third grader. But let's get into that because this is really critical, and I don't mean critical theory.
well,
I
it
mean
kind of is that
it's
too.
critical as in necessary. Yeah, we'll talk more about critical theory. So you go through this program, and I appreciate that you highlighted the lack of depth and that you were aware of it. You were an older student at that point too, so you
Mhm.
had some life under you, and you probably had this instinct that was like, there's got to be more. So let's talk about this. The social justice motif that I know already. I'm just going to cut to the conclusion here. You ended up not finishing the program, and I'll let you tell the story as to why and how you ended up where you are. So you mentioned Solid Ground. That's a live stream that you host. It's also a community of people. You have a Substack. So Start wherever you want to start, explain away. I'm just going to hit my mute button and you can talk because I know you can talk and you talk very well. So I'd rather hear you, and I'm sure the audience would because they hear me plenty.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, so I went into this program. I had this previous experience with studying a bit of psychology. I'd taken a lot of psychology courses in community college, and then I majored in it at a university, as I said. And so had a lot of this background, and it had been a while. I couldn't wait to get back into it once I finally decided and chose and went into a counseling program. I was like, this is really interesting. I'm going to feel my mind expand all over again, like I did before. How much deeper are we going to go now that I'm here at the graduate level? What I touched before was just undergrad. So maybe this is going to be amazing. And what I found almost right away was a shocking shallowness in the work that we were doing. My undergrad, just like my intro to psych program, my or intro to psych class, my abnormal psychology class in community college went deeper than most of the work that I did in graduate school. It was it was 2019 and I lived in Seattle and I had a sense of this kind of social justice thing. I didn't know what to call it though. I mean, I'd been to a Jesuit undergrad. My law school was a Jesuit school. They put it was Seattle U and St. Mary's in San Antonio. So it's a Catholic university, but a Catholic Jesuit university. I'm not sure exactly how that works. The social justice is a word that they use all the time. I was really familiar with that phrase, and I had a sense of what it meant, but it was being applied differently. So it didn't scare me away when I saw social justice in the signature of my school. It was just like, oh yeah, okay, we like social justice. We're trying to make the world fair for people so that there's
Right.
not massive
It hadn't gotten on
inequity. Yeah.
steroids yet.
Yeah, and I had a different sense of what those words meant than what I came to see them as meaning now in contemporary parlance. But when I was at Antioch University, which is where I did my counseling graduate program, almost right away there was this use your pronouns. You need to put your pronouns after your name or when you introduce yourself. And that was the first kind of red flag for me. It was it felt, I remember trying to parse it at the time. Like, why does this feel so bizarre and wrong for us to be doing here? It's because we're in an applied psychology program where we're supposed to be studying human behavior, and we are employing this technique to pretend that we don't know whether we're men or women. Like we're going to do that with each other and then with our clients as well. Like that you can't know if I'm a woman unless I tell you that I'm a woman. I can call myself they, or I could sit right here and call myself he. And I saw that in my program. I saw women with makeup and dresses on and with they them or he him after their name. And so it was very strange that these people had been accepted and were being endorsed as counselors by this program. So that seemed very strange. Like there's some obfuscation going on here, the reason for which I'm not quite sure. I think that we're trying to be compassionate to the rare individual who may really be androgynous in appearance, and trying to signal to them that it's okay for you to let us know so that we don't bother you by having to ask you all the time how we should talk about you. So maybe we're all going to kind of play this game together so that that person doesn't feel awkward. That's the best way that I could kind of understand it. But it felt like we were jumping into some kind of weird social game. And what we were there to study was how to understand social games and how to understand these kinds of dynamics. So why were we employing one? So that was the first kind of red flag for me that I had to try to work out what I thought about. And then the second real place that I encountered this was the in my second quarter of the program, I had to take a multicultural counseling class. Was it called multicultural perspectives? And it really turned into just a kind of a white people bad class. And I know that sounds reductive and simplistic, but that's really how it felt. We had to look at all these identity markers we were told, and this is again, for anybody who's heard me talk about this before, I apologize because I have talked about this before, but this addressing model, it's Hayes addressing model. If you look it up, this is where it comes from.
I
Somebody
actually
named
don't know
Hayes.
this. I don't mind if you
Oh,
explain it
oh,
because I've
okay.
never heard this before.
Yeah, this was my first day of this course. The teacher wrote on the board the word addressing in from top to bottom as an acronym, and then she put in age, disability, acquired, disability, genetic, religion, ethnicity, uh, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, all these kinds of things that just went down this word. And she said, this is how you are to see yourself and your client in relationship to one another. You put in like what was it, an O for oppressor and an M for marginalized next to each one of these. And you basically use it as a choice matrix with binary choice. You can either be marginalized or you can be an oppressor or privileged or whatever the word was. And whoever is more privileged is the privileged person in the room. Whoever's more oppressor, whoever's more marginalized is the marginalized person in the room. And you're to do this for yourself and for your clients every time you're working with a client. So,
But it's totally subjective, right? So like you could just put
and
yourself
there's a
wherever you want.
and race is the trump card. So it doesn't matter how many places you're marginalized. If you're white and your client, maybe they're privileged all the way up the thing, but they're black, then you have to also add that in. Now you are the privileged one, no matter how you scored on the other one. So there was a trump card in there. It was a it was it kind of shocked me. I said I wanted the course to blow my mind, but it blew my mind in the wrong way. And that class was a pivotal experience for me in going through this program. I can tell you more about it if you want to hear more about my experiences with that particular course. But I did get through it. I raised a grievance about it afterwards, and then that grievance was squashed, and I continued going through the program. The social justice sort of marginalized, privileged ideology was in there throughout the rest of the program, but it was kind of a graft onto every course. Like, oh, you have to give like this statement about how identity characteristics are showing up in your client's life whenever you do a case conceptualization or it was in there. It was like a graft. It wasn't as pronounced throughout the rest of the academic work, but it was very strong in the communications from the chancellor and the provost, and they had something called the Justice and Leadership Council that would send us lots of email about all kinds of stuff like that. Basically, one more thing, I guess it's really important to say, we were told in that second quarter in that multicultural perspectives course that as counselors, our number one role was to be an activist for social justice. That was our number one role. And I know we kind of say that a lot now. We hear that a lot. We're kind of familiar with the weirdness of that. But when I sit with that for a minute, it still hits me as so wrong and so bizarre that that's being accepted. Your role as a counselor is to be an activist for social change. You're socially engineering when you're in the room with your client. And
The,
so, behaviorism and all that, like the critical examination of the modalities and the work that we were learning was all eclipsed by the reductivism of the ideology that we were being taught with.
this is making a lot more sense. So I think because of the gap between my academic experience and what I'm seeing come out, I'm not sitting in classrooms anymore. I just see the throughputs of it. And of course I hear about it and I read about it. And I've just mentally filled in some gaps on my own, I think, but this makes so much more sense because what you're describing now is the foundational premise of a counseling program has become uh, identification through subjective labels which inherently are limiting unto themselves. I don't like labels because I think human beings are deep and divine creatures who are capable of all things great and terrible. And if you put a label on somebody, any label, it could be your job, you're inherently putting a limit, right?
Mhm.
So we've got these labels that are limiting, but then behind those labels, there's some sort of weighted value based on a subliminal or maybe a an implied context that those labels have worth on a spectrum of people who need advocacy. So therefore, we as the professionals in the counseling realm are responsible for the advocacy, which would fall into the justice category. And justice is one of our five ethical precepts. It's not that justice is bad. But what we have to do is we have to be careful about when we take action out of a spirit of justice because we're inherently stepping on the person's autonomy, which is
Mhm.
another one of our five ethical precepts. You can't have both simultaneously. You're either doing justice or you're honoring autonomy. And it's okay to advocate on somebody's behalf if you have their consent, right? Sometimes it's children in a foster care system. You want to go advocate for them because they have no advocate, right? And they can't consent by law. But to do it as a default premise, it betrays the idea that we would allow people to choose for themselves, which is the spirit of autonomy, whatever they do in their lives. So, one of the things that I was taught very explicitly was avoid directive therapy because you
Mhm.
can't know what's best for the other individual. And this motif flies straight in the face of that. It's saying that you do and you shall advocate for what is best for the person based on your own subjective lens, maybe based on this rubric or whatever the what was it called again? Addressing. Um, and so it right from the jump, you're undermining the whole purpose of why somebody would come in for treatment in the first place because you've inverted the power dynamic. You've centered yourself as the arbiter of what is good and bad for the individual, and you will act out of that. And apparently, you're also supposed to tell them about it too, which is wild to me.
Mhm.
Um, but now it
Yeah.
makes sense. It makes sense. I hate it, but it makes sense.
Well, and so your privileges are things that you owe somebody back. You owe back to society because you have these privileges. And your marginalization points are basically points that on which you are owed. So there's kind of this sense of entitlements versus I've taken too much. And so the thing that we did not get a lot of instruction on was what exactly we were supposed to do about this. When you talk about advocacy, I'm not exactly sure what, I still don't know what we were expected to advocate for specifically. Like I kind of picture my client is struggling with something, maybe something economic, and as their advocate, I should get on the phone and start making calls for them or something like that. That's kind of what I picture as like a direct sort of advocacy.
Like
And like you
asking
said,
for a raise at their job or something.
yeah,
I'm going to
exactly.
call your boss.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that makes sense when you're talking about like this child in the foster care. Maybe you would step into that role a little bit, or maybe you'd help them search up something like they are looking for work. And so you actually, during session, you help them by pulling up the computer and doing some searches. But that's kind of normal stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not crazy um outside of the realm of what you might do with somebody anyway if you're working with them. So I kind of took from it was that advocacy mostly meant how you talk about social justice outside of the therapy room. Because another thing that was really kind of bizarre was there, and we touched on this a lot in that program, this that sort of individualism bad, collectivism good.
Yeah.
You know the Sue and Sue book because I think you mentioned it the other day. You had to study with that, didn't you? Daryl Wing Sue,
Yeah, I actually have it sitting right
David
here
Sue.
next to me.
Oh,
It's
I'm sorry.
fifth edition. No, I keep it on
Yeah.
hand as a prop,
I know I
more than
usually
anything.
do too. I think I moved it to the bookshelf, but I used to
I'd
keep it
like to
right
drill
next
a
to me.
hole in it and take it out shooting,
Yeah.
but this is useful so I can bag on the ideology.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because the guy the main author of that book is he's a Chinese American and he's got a real bitterness
Yes,
towards American culture. I mean, he's just
even
really
though he's
bitter.
making tons of money off of it. But
tons. He's the guy
never mind
who
that. Never mind that.
basically developed the cultural competency um, parts of the counseling ethics. And so they I don't know. I
He's
don't
been
know the
doing it
whole
since the
history of this.
70s.
Yeah,
It's
he's been
crazy.
doing
Yeah,
it.
Gerald Wing Sue's been doing it a long time.
Maybe you know his history better than I do, and you can speak to it more intelligently. But when we got this book, and he bags on individualism over and over and over in favor of collectivist culture. And so there the idea that your advocacy is about the individual in front of you, it's not even really about that. It's more about how you use your privilege, how you use your voice. Silence is violence, and you're supposed to be out there. Basically, it's they want to turn counselors into a horde of rabid social media posters who are changing the way that the population thinks about these ideas.
It's worked.
And yeah, I mean, it really has. But at its core, what's the substance? There's not really any substance. It's
There's no
just
goal.
there's no goal, because what do you get when you get all these marginalized populations into the privileged position? Is that the end goal? Or is there a principle at play here where then we'd have to invert that and start lifting up the new marginalized? And I don't see any principle at play in this. But this was the thing that was my program was steeped in, and I couldn't believe it. I still kind of can't believe it.
It well, I mean, it's Marxism, right? It's cultural Marxism. We think of economic Marxism as the redistribution of wealth, but this is the redistribution of privilege or ideologies or ideas or statuses or something intangible. Economics at least is intangible. You can take some money from some rich person, whoever determines what rich is, and then sprinkle it around to the not rich. But with status or privilege. I mean, who's measuring? What's the barometer? And then of course you're going to end up, with the farm animals who are a little bit more equal than the other farm animals. But it becomes a self-licking ice cream cone where it never ends
I
and it
love that.
perpetuates its own grift.
I,
Yeah,
I
I
like
got
that
that
better
from
than the Ouroboros. So it's a nice one. The
yeah,
self-licking.
yeah, it never ends because you're never running out of things to solve. And it's great for business, I suppose, because your calendar's always going to be full because you can always identify somebody who just needs a little more. But it's terrible for humanity. And again, like I said, it flies right in the face of what the profession historically has been, which is to center on an individual's ability to tap into him or herself to achieve great things. But if you're pitching that up to the collective, then there's no individual and there's no accountability either because you can always diffuse accountability to the group. So nobody's ever responsible. It's always somebody else's fault, and we all get stuck in paralysis, blaming each other. So it's a beautiful construct for somebody who wants to control others, like the author of the curriculum, because that person's just going to always be in charge. I could draw a rough analogy to say suicide prevention, which I'm very familiar with, and I've been doing this for a really long time. If we end suicide, the suicide preventionists are out of work, right? So how do we end suicide? We keep people healthy. But then if you're so fragile egoed as to not be able to separate what you do from who you are, then that's a threat to you as an individual, as a person. You don't know who you are if you're not doing suicide prevention all over the place. So there's a perverse incentive to continue finding problems
Mhm.
in order to keep yourself employed. Homelessness does the same thing. It's
Oh
it's
yeah,
it's wild. Not,
very
in
much.
fact, just recently, Nevada gave $50 million to Carillon, which is a megacorp worth like $71 billion and generating 30% revenue increases year over year, to run the 988 crisis response line. And there was recently a slide deck that was published and sent out to all email blasts far and wide, and one of the target goals was to increase 988 calls by 10%. And I'm like, isn't that the exact opposite of what we're trying to do? Well,
Oh
Carolyn has to
man,
justify its own existence, right? So,
that's a perfect encapsulation of what you're describing, the
like,
perverse
I'm
incentives.
out here trying to keep people from calling
Yeah,
988, and they want more people. It's like, I get the idea you want people to use the service,
yeah,
but you can't keep ratcheting up the expectation every
that's
year. Eventually,
exactly
you're going to have
right.
everybody in crisis to keep your business model. So, anyway, at what point did you hit your throw your hands in the air, I'm out breaking point?
Well, I mentioned that I raised a grievance after that course. I went through that course
What was the grievance
gently
about?
arguing. What was the
Or are you going
grievance
to get
about?
to it? I'm
Yeah, I'll
probably
tell
jumping
you.
ahead.
I'll tell you what it was. So
Okay.
I went through that course kind of gently arguing. Everybody in the room seemed to be in accordance with what we were being taught. And I just saw so many problems with it that I raised questions throughout the quarter. I was intimidated because I was kind of the only, not kind of, I was the only person in the room who was not just nodding along and talking about my privilege. I also, because I wanted to do well. I wanted the teacher to like me. I wanted the other students to like me. I wanted to do well in this program. I wasn't really combative. I don't have a problem with confrontation, but it was scary to confront this. So I was actually really diplomatic and much more gentle, much less debate style when I was trying to raise questions about this. So everything I raised was kind of gently put forward, couched in a lot of careful language. But even still, it stood out. And I was sort of singled out by the professor. She a couple of times said really humiliating things to me. One time she told me that I was going to have to reparent myself if I wanted to not do harm to my minority clients because I raised the question about how is race always this trump card. And um, at the end of the course, I made a comment about how I felt like this. I had hoped, she asked us all for our feedback. What did you get out of this course? What did you hope to get out of it? And how do you feel about it now? And I said, I really hoped we'd get a little bit deeper into some of the human dynamics that are at play underneath of these social demographic trends. Instead of just focusing on the trends, I felt like we could have gone a lot deeper. And she started to cry about her emotional labor. She really did. She said, all of my emotional labor that went into this course. And she stood there with tears coming down and just kind of quietly crying until a person sitting next to me said, I think we've heard enough white voices for now about me talking. And so this is the way that I was sort of shut up during that course. I can tell you more story. I could write a book on that course, I think. But after the quarter ended and we got our grades, the school did narrative evaluations. The professor wrote in my narrative evaluation that I needed to seek my own therapy to resolve my racial issues.
Yeah.
And so she questioned my mental health in my narrative evaluation because I had academic disagreements with the way that the critical social justice material was presented. I raised a grievance over that. I said that that was an inappropriate use of the narrative evaluation and it was retributive. And you want to talk about the self-licking ice cream cone. This was the process was basically if I wanted to go through the grievance, I had to go through a series of meetings with her and another faculty member. And so it would just be it would be a struggle session with
A
me and two
re-education
social
camp.
justice people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I dropped that and I had another issue in the program that had nothing to do with me and a teacher. It was just a this is dumb, but it was just a organizational problem where one of the professors, after the end of the quarter, we were halfway through the next quarter, she canceled like half the class's grades and made us redo our finals. And everybody was really frustrated. It was just like this was really sloppy. She'd already given us our grades. We'd already gotten our narrative evaluations. So there were other issues. So the program was a mill in a number of ways. It wasn't very academically rigorous, had a lot of this ideology in it, and it was also structurally really sloppy and disorganized. At this point, I had a lot of credits already. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to leave this program and go somewhere else. And I was offered if I wanted to keep my credits, I could stay within that Antioch system and I could transfer to a different university within Antioch and do my classes online. And I thought maybe this one is just so crazy because it's in Seattle. And I knew Seattle was getting really crazy. So I thought, well, I'll just try my luck at one of the other ones. And so I started online at this other program. This was in 2020, we're in COVID. Suffice it to say it wasn't less crazy. It just got more crazy. We got the like memo about how we were supposed to be out there railing against January 6th protesters. We got all kinds of vaccine propaganda. We got the defund the police propaganda. We got the degender everything and refer to women as people with vulvas. At one point, we actually got a memo telling us that we are not supposed to use mother, father, sister, brother. We're supposed to use sibling, parent. And if you're talking about women in kind of a reproductive sense, you're supposed to refer to them by their body parts instead of as women. So it didn't get less crazy at the new place. The at the point where the program came to a head for me, I don't know how many classes I still had to take. It was like 2 or 3. It was very few classes. I was almost done with the curriculum. I'd sort of been squeaking my way forward, just like, can I do this? It's a sunk cost, and maybe I just get to the finish line, and I can try to stay honest with myself and not, I'm doing these like gymnastics when I'm writing my papers, trying not to say stuff that I disagree with, but also trying to give them what they're trying to get from me. There was a course that I needed to take. It was a trauma, grief, and loss course. And I tried to take this the first time I signed up for it. The very first requirement of the course was to go to our syllabus and read the civility pledge and come back and write a statement that I agree with the civility pledge. So I'm like, what is the civility? I never even saw this. It's in the fine print. So I go to the syllabus, I read this thing, and it's like, I pledge to be interrogating my intersectional something, and like my ageism, sexism, and whatever. It was just like this. It was basically, I am a social justice warrior, is what this pledge said. And I looked at it and I'm like, I can't write that I agree with this. And I can't do that. And so I was thinking about my options. Do I come in and say why I can't do it and just become a pariah for the course, and this teacher is going to hate me, and I'm going to go through what I just went through in that stupid multicultural program or course a year ago or 2 years ago, whatever it was. So this would have been in 2021 at this point. So it was 2 years ago. And I just didn't want to go through that again. I didn't want to be the tall poppy again, getting mowed. And I dropped the class. So this is one of my last classes that I have to take. I signed up for it again with a different professor, thinking maybe that professor was just a bit of a zealot. And this was fall of 2021. And here it was again. That first requirement was to go
Sign the loyalty oath.
sign the loyalty oath. Yeah. And I could not do it. So I contacted my faculty advisor. I finally got enough courage to like call out the program a little bit, but I've been trying to just go under, just not cause that problem that I'd had in the multicultural class again. And when I spoke with her about it, I said, I'm kind of concerned because the ideology, blah, blah, blah. And I don't remember how I worded it, because I know, again, I was trying to be diplomatic and not get myself outed too hard. And she said, if you don't like it, then I advise you to get through the program as quickly as possible, because it's just going to increase. And then she said the words that I've repeated over and over to people. She said, we are aware that we are no longer training counselors who can work with the Trump supporter. And she laughed as she said it.
Wow.
And I thought, that's crazy. And
Wow.
for me, at this point, I am completely disgusted with left-right politics. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I don't care about that. It doesn't mean that much to me. It means a lot to some people, though, and I understand that. And it's always meant a lot to many, many people. They align themselves. They understand these. These are an important part of how they understand their government and their civil values. I was always a Democrat. I was always left wing. But I would have never said that somebody who was right wing was beneath treatment for mental health. I mean, my goodness, this was an insane place to draw a line. And I was really taken aback. There were a couple of other things that I could get into, but I won't for the interest of time, because it's just detail. But I raised another grievance with the program. I was like, okay, I'm going through this process now, because this is just academically unfair what they're doing here. they reviewed and dismissed my grievance. And then when I tried to appeal, they denied me the right to appeal. So I made a video about this at this point because I'm thinking I can't, in good conscience, sign that. I will not sign that pledge. I will not be pushed over that line. And so I'm watching years of my money and my time. And I was, I have 4 kids. This was not easy. I had to quit my job in order to go back to school. So this is a big impact on my family. Uh, and I'd invested a lot of my life in it at this point. And I'm staring down the reality that I have to walk away from this program with no degree after investing all of that into it. So I made a video about it and I put it on YouTube. And that was where kind of the public part of this conversation for me really started in calling out what I was seeing in counselor education.
How'd the video go?
It went well. I don't know how many views it's gotten. I mean, some people get tons of views. I think it got a couple 100,000 views, and I got
Wow.
contacted by tons of people. I mean, just immediately I started to get emails through my website. I quickly cobbled together a website as I started the view count was going up. I was like, okay, I got to give people a way to contact me, and I started to get lots of communications from other people who were dealing with the same thing, counseling students, professors, psychologists, counselors in the field, people who were seeing this in the applied psychology realm, very much like what I was describing. And so I'm not much for just sitting and talking to the camera. It's never really been anything that I feel comfortable doing. And yet I felt like this was a really important conversation to be a part of and to be able to engage with. So I just started inviting people who were contacting me to record their their experiences. And so that started this interview process that I've been doing now for, I guess it's 3+ years. And I had started a coaching practice the year before my departure from the program. I had a background in health coaching, and I thought, well, I can do something that's more holistic and sort of offer offer a service where you're listening with people. You're not taking responsibility for them or diagnosing them, but you kind of get a picture of their daily rhythms and their health habits and also what's going on for them, and use some of those counseling skills in a non-clinical way. And I had that practice already. It was an in-person practice that I started in, I guess that would have been 2021. Oh yeah, so I guess it was 2022 when all of this was going down, when I made that video. I have to think about my timeline.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how that went. And I have a YouTube channel where I put all these interviews, and you mentioned Solid Ground as well. I don't want to get off track, so I can talk
No,
about that
this
later,
is
or
this
I
is
can get
great.
tangential. It's very
No,
tangential.
it's fine. People need to hear this because I think that the broader populace just doesn't understand how bad it's gotten. And yes, Antioch is on the fringe, but Antioch is large and they have many campuses and
They do.
offshoots. But it's very narcissistic what you described there. And for the people who've paid attention to this show over the years, we've talked about the cluster B stuff here and there. But what you describe is the emotional leveraging, emotional manipulation, the violation and abuse of the power dynamic in the academic setting. You describe how you're intimidated to come up against these people because they allegedly, ostensibly held your career in their hands, and that unfortunately is not in alignment with our ethical codes and values. It is, however, in alignment with conscription. And if you're going to conscript a bunch of people, you're going to compel them through any coercive means necessary to get them to sign on to the tribe, right? And they don't care about your logic. They don't care about your arguments. They care about conformity. And we see this in domestic violence situations. We see this in employment situations. We see this in all sorts of different relationships. And what you're describing is what our friend Josh Slocum describes as the systematic execution of cluster B dynamics, where the whole system is narcissistically abusing its participants. So I wanted to highlight that because it's really important that we point this out in organizational cultures. Because if you find yourself in this situation where you're like, man, I'm having to compromise my personal morals, ethics, beliefs, values for the organization. That is something that we've come to know as moral injury, and morally injured people end up being very unwell. And
Absolutely. I'm so glad you're saying that. That is so important to say because that is right now one of my major concerns about the counseling profession is that you're either getting a crop of new counselors who sign on to social justice, or you're getting a crop of really morally injured people who are struggling to put themselves back together in the midst of having to not knowing, looking over their shoulder because now it's not your degree that's being held over your head, it's your license.
yep,
And you mentioned that Antioch is a bit of an outlier, and that's what I wondered at first. That's I wanted to talk about this counseling program. Everybody, if you care about this, there's a ton of people graduating from this program at this school, and people should know that the school is doing a really a really crazy social engineering project using their counselors. But what I found very quickly was that it's not actually that much
it's
of an
not.
outlier. The people I spoke with just in the first, I mean, I was in Seattle. The college that I was attending at that point was in New England online. I was getting contacted from by people who were in the UK, who were all over the US, some of whom were enrolled in religious programs.
Yeah, yep,
Some, so these would be more traditionally conservative programs. It kind of spanned the gamut. It's and in fact, one of the things I'll frequently get asked by students or prospective students, where can I find a program that's not woke?
you can't.
And even when you're reaching out to colleagues and you're trying to find this, it's really hard to find. I haven't identified a list of programs that aren't woke, and the reason is that KCREP,
Accreditation. Yep.
the Council for Accreditation of Counseling and Related Programs, KCREP, they are the program that, like you said, accredits these counseling programs. If you go to a KCREP accredited school, it's much easier for you to get your licensing hours. You have lower hour requirements. There's all these kind of sweetheart deals that make it really appealing for students to go to a KCREP institution. It streamlines your process quite a bit. It also, I think it gives you access to being able to get licensed in other states more easily.
Yep. Yep.
It's kind of the only show in town, and the cultural competency requirements come through them. So it is not, I wish it were just an Antioch problem.
I take it you've met with Susanna Alexander?
I have, yeah, a
Yeah.
couple of times. She's great.
Yeah, she's been on Noggin Notes also. She's done a pretty aggressive deep dive and is fomenting some solutions to that. But I'm afraid that K-crep is so pervasive and has its hooks into legislatures now that even going through the legislative process to fix this is probably not going to happen.
Mhm.
The counterpart to KCREP is COAMFT, which is the
Mhm.
Council on Accreditation for Marriage and Family Therapy Education, and they do the same thing. It's all
Mhm.
baked
Mhm.
into their standards. So what you get is if you try to hold an institution accountable, the institution just points to the accrediting body, the professors point to the institution, the students point to the professors, and on down we go. And it's not until you can extract yourself from that and start working as you see fit that you can escape from it. But even then, all those graduates are now running the licensing boards. So there's a very perverse inversion of what should be therapy and is not anymore. And it's problematic because we're no longer helping individuals overcome things. We're trying to help individuals conform into what we believe they should be representing. And that's how you socially engineer society. I mentioned conscription before, but to pull it back to a clinical lens, it's all deficits based. It's no
Mhm.
longer solution focused. It's no
Mhm.
longer opportunity based. It's no longer growth based. It's centered on the deficits a person has because one of the crazy, I don't know, paradoxes that they'll say is that you can be an oppressor and a marginalized person. It's like, really? You just took this binary thing and made it dialectic, and you can't tell me why or what the value scale is,
Well,
right?
it's your internalized white supremacy or
Totally,
whatever.
totally. Even if you're black, you've got internalized white supremacy, and
Mhm.
that's an Ibram Kendi thing. And it all collapses in on itself if you try to apply logic, which is why the emotion stuff works so well, because emotion just trumps logic when you scream at somebody and claim or feign wounding, which of
Mhm.
course is unethical. You can't harm anybody, right? So they'll hang their hat on that and say, well, to challenge somebody is harmful because you're making them uncomfortable, and that's hogwash. It's not harmful; it's actually growth. But if you're centered on the deficits and there's just nothing you can do about it because it's systemic, well, then you erase the individual altogether. So, talk to me about solid ground. I was on your show just a couple of days ago. I'm very glad to have been there. Wonderful work that you're doing, but give our listening audience the background as to how that came to be and why it's so important and who participates.
Sure, yeah. Solid Ground is it's it's a really wonderful project that has been a joy in my life. So when I guess it was 2020, I found CTA, which is critical therapy antidote, and that's an important linking piece in this. So critical therapy antidote is a UK US uh, joint project that
I am a member.
supports, you remember, they support counselors who are um, opposed to this critical takeover of the profession. And I got in touch with them after reading a an essay by Val Thomas, who's the founder, in New Discourses. So I was just looking for anybody else writing about this, what's going on with this field. And I found this essay that she'd written, and it really spoke to what I was experiencing. So I reached out and got in touch and got started connecting with CTA. Through CTA, I met Jennifer Friend, who is a licensed clinical social worker in on the East Coast. She's in Virginia, and she had gone through a crazy experience at her own workplace. She worked for the county, and that's her own story to tell. But she'd gone through her own, social justice administrative nightmare there. Excuse me. And she um she and I became friends, and she contacted Counterweight. So here's all these links in the chain. Counterweight was an organization started by Helen Pluckrose, and this was to kind of address and help people who were experiencing institutional social justice kind of discrimination, or whatever you want to call it, this authoritarianism. It's hard to know what words to use because everything sounds like jargon, but you know it when you see it. DEI, we'll just call it. Um, and Jennifer she proposed and started running a peer support arm of Counterweight. And there was so much need, so many people who were just breaking down over what was going on in their work or in their school or in their families, as people were divided by these ideologies. And she reached out to me. We had a couple of other colleagues. We all did peer support groups for Counterweight. Counterweight ended up folding. It didn't stay the course, whatever reasons. And the need was still there. So Jody Shaw, who is she's the Smith College employee. I think you brought this up the other day. No, maybe it
I
wasn't
don't
you.
think I know
Somebody else
Jody.
brought that up. Jody Shaw was an employee at Smith College who'd also gone through her own story. And again, that's Jody's story to tell. And we had another colleague who was a PhD student in the UK. And the four of us, we wanted to keep that thing going that we were doing for Counterweight after Counterweight went away. And we decided to call it Solid Ground. We launched it in January of 2023. It still has, I believe, we still have people from Counterweight. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but we did for a while anyway. Those groups just kept running. We just ran them on our own. And we offer community and support for people who are experiencing kind of that on the spectrum of that moral injury that you're talking about, whether it's in their own workplace, in their university, their children's school, their community, their family, however you're finding yourself uh, interfacing with these DEI or authoritarian medical ideologies as well, because we saw a lot of
Yep.
problems during COVID. This really divided people.
California
So
with the AB 2098 or whatever it was, telling doctors they weren't free to opine as they saw fit with their license. They had to conform to whatever they decided the CDC said or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And when we launched the community officially and started offering the groups, we have facilitated groups. We run about it's three most weeks, with a fourth one. So I guess I should explain what that means. So we have synchronous groups. We meet on Zoom and we have members just come in. We have an hour and a half to talk. I facilitate one group a week. Jennifer Friend facilitates one. Christine Siefenwalk of CTA, she's also part of our Solid Ground team. She facilitates a group every week. And then we have another facilitated group that meets immediately after the live stream. So we have a live stream every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, which I think is 1 p.m. Eastern. And we often have a guest with us. We talk about topical cultural issues. It's always a good conversation. It's really a highlight of my week. It's just such a dynamic and interesting thing. And I loved having you on. We all did. We got a lot of great
Thank you.
feedback from the live chat as well. It's nice because you can interact with the broader Solid Ground community, which is like the people who attend those live chats, those that are part of that conversation for the live stream. And then some of those and many others are part of our smaller community, which is where we meet in on those synchronous Zoom meetings. And so there's 3 to 4 meetings a week. And we also do a bi-weekly, so it's the second and fourth Tuesday, we facilitate a meeting for counselors and coaches who want to do case consultation and talk about professional issues or issues that they're seeing in their work.
I
So,
believe there's similar models popping up. CTA does something like that. I think Open Therapy Institute may be doing it. I don't know. I get a bunch of
yeah.
emails and I end up deleting most of them because I can't participate because they're on odd times. But my curiosity here is twofold. I pro I probably should get more involved because I think that I've figured out how to bow my neck against some of this stuff, and I could probably be of assistance because I find myself in that role usually when I do these drop-ins on various things. But the twofold curiosity is one, what's the solution in practical terms? I mean, support's nice and all, but at some point you gotta galvanize and push back and take action. And then the second is, have you had anybody try to sabotage it? And the reason I ask that is because I've heard of similar things happening on Facebook groups. I'm not on Facebook, but I know people who are, and they tell stories about how people will try to infiltrate from the ultra authoritarian side and try to sow discord and take down the efforts, but also personal attacks, character assassinations, board complaints, that kind of thing. So what's the goal? How do we attack this properly to effectuate change instead of just turtling ourselves, which I think probably is useful, but not necessarily moving the needle. And then have you experienced any of this attempted uh, sabotage from the people who just absolutely refuse to bend and are threatened by your efforts?
Uh, I have not in Solid Ground. We have not had any saboteurs. I mean, the live stream will get the occasional commenter who's really kind of nasty or wants to make trouble. That's fine. It's a live
Yeah.
stream. It's YouTube. The comment
Right.
section is like that. We have a locals group. We charge $5 a month for it. It was the minimum that we could charge,
That's
and
on
we
the
did that
platform Locals, I take it.
locals platform.
I
Yeah.
hadn't heard of that in years. I didn't know that was
Oh
still
yeah,
around.
yeah, I know.
Okay.
It's kind of old, and ours is a little sleepy lately, but it sometimes it gets up and it's really humming with a lot of posts and a lot of contact, and other times it has its ebb and flow. But the reason we put that $5 limit or fee on there in order to post was to avoid the casual, hater who wants to come in
Yeah.
and throw lob bombs. And it's been very effective. For our synchronous meetings, similarly, we charge $10 a month. You have to be a paid $10 subscriber to our Substack to be
Okay.
able to get those links. And most people who want to come in and do something nasty aren't they're not going to invest money
They're
in
not
it.
that motivated. That's
Not that
interesting.
motivated. Yeah. So We have not in solid ground had that. I think the answer, I I think that a lot of the problems that we're talking about with the kind of organizational narcissism, as you described it, I think of it as kind of a bureaucratic sadism that
Yeah,
I think
that's
that
that's
is
probably
very
fair.
prevalent. Uh, the Even just thinking back to the beginning of the conversation when we're talking about the clinical versus the psyche, what are all these assessments doing when we're talking about the human soul? What is all the paperwork and the research and the data? And I think that the social justice stuff is just an offshoot of that. It's just another way it's applied demography,
Yep.
really. I mean, it's just demographics applied. We're looking at data points, we're looking at aggregates, we're extrapolating from larger data sets down to what we believe the individual experience is like. It's all legalism. It's
Yep.
all layers and layers of structure and data, and it's kind of like this pixelated picture of what we are as humans. And the real you lose the real heart and soul of life when you try to break it into legalistic steps. So that's your bureaucracy, that's your assessment heavy clinical work, that's your social justice. The truth of what we are, the spirit of what we are, is something that's a lot harder to define. And I think we need to get back to that recognition of the soul in each of us. And
Yeah.
and I think
Keep
that
going.
kind of defies breaking down for a reason. I think it defies, the step. How do you make that stepwise? I mean, it's something that's more Aristotelian. It's more philosophical than anything you can implement with new legislation or new
Right.
guidelines. So,
I don't think that would be useful anyway because the lobbyists have their bags of cash anyway. So I don't think that's and you can't legislate morality. And this is essentially what we're trying to do. Uh, Let me bounce this off you. I have a hypothesis that part of the reason that we've in the counseling profession in the grad school specifically have moved away from psychodynamic education is because psychodynamic education by its own nature taps into the center of an individual, and you can't have that in a collectivist culture. So I think that's why they've pushed that to the wayside. And here's an example of it. In the DSM-4, we had a section on, and then granted it was under like areas for further study or whatever, but it listed out defensive functioning and it listed defense mechanisms. And these are very psychodynamic, often Jungian, sometimes Freudian ways in which the ego will defend itself against change. And they present differently. And I have a whole discussion on this too. But that doesn't exist anymore. They took it out in the DSM-5. So now you got the APA that authors that's the American Psychiatric Association, that authors the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is what we use for diagnostics, which if you listen to Mark Ruffalo's work, not that Mark Ruffalo, Mark L. Ruffalo from Florida, if you listen to his stuff or read his work, he can pinpoint very precisely back to DSM-3 where managed care took over the book. And so what you described there with this bureaucratic, what do you call sadism? That's you're describing managed care. That's
mhm,
insurance,
mhm,
right? And so my hypothesis is they can't have individuals being individuals because then that would throw the whole model out the way. So
absolutely.
I think that my hope is staked in the idea that individuals on a deeper level in their minds, in their souls, in their being, that we're not time plus matter plus chance to be manipulated by bad actors, but that we do have an ability to discern truth. And I think people crave that. And I think we're being so mm, shepherded into being simple widgets and
Mhm,
in walking the earth that we know that we're not machines and we deeply desire more than that. So to come in and just solve your drinking problem or whatever, your anxiety problem is not good enough. They can get sober, they can calm the anxiety, but they want to know why they ever got to drinking and anxiousness in the first place. And if a whole bastion of people in our profession, we'll say, I don't know, throw out a number, 80%, are not going deep enough because they literally haven't been trained to, because if you train them to, you have to push them into discomfort, and discomfort is harm, then then they don't know how. They can't sit with distress. They can't bring somebody through distress, right? So if we take the remaining 20 or 25%, we'll say you, me, the people you listed, some of the people I know, and we start talking to the broader population in a way that resonates in a truthful manner that anchors people and offers them opportunity to grow and develop in a way that they intrinsically know how, because human beings have been around for a really long time, and this thing just showed up 2 seconds ago. Then I think we're going to have the marketplace respond in kind. That's my hope. I hope
Mhm.
that if we just utilize the behaviorism for its purposes, which is fine. We all want to modify behaviors, but at the core of it, we're asking, why are you doing the behaviors? And really inviting people to explore that and then choose to do something different, something deeper, something more meaningful, something more purposeful, something more intentional. They will rise to the occasion. They will level up and go, man, this is really good. I want to go back to this guy or this gal. And then we can have a ripple effect in the opposite direction of what this critical theory stuff has done. So that's my hope. I think that's the tactic, but we have to be bold enough to believe in our own abilities to do it. And I think it may require pulling the plug and extracting ourselves or decoupling ourselves from the managed care model
Oh yeah.
and its bureaucratic crushing paperwork. Because
Hmm.
that's the trend. The trend is to more paperwork, more data gathering, more analysis, more and whatever they're doing with it, I have no idea because I'm not seeing any results. The federal government and SAMHSA are not taking the data from the community behavioral health centers and doing anything with it, but it's killing the clinicians. So
Hmm.
I don't want to do more
Hmm.
assessments. I don't want to do more paperwork. So I think if we can decouple ourselves from that, charge nominal fees so that we can provide access, something you and I have discussed before, which I'm very excited about, but I can't quite figure out how to do that in my calendar. Um, then I do think that there's hope that we can push back against this because it is everywhere. I'm also part of Smartphone Free Childhood US, which is
Hmm.
a spinoff of Smartphone Free Childhood UK. Same stuff's happening in schools, same stuff's happening in corporations, same stuff's happening in broader medicine, not
You,
just mental health.
it is.
And it's killing humans. And I think we're
Yes.
we're eventually all just growing sick of the artifice. I think we're going to grow out of it and
Yeah.
we're going to decide that we're tired of AI movies and synthesized music and and this is what we're doing. We're doing a synthetic form of help in this profession. And I think people are tired of it. So if we get a cadre of us together to do it the right way, the way that has always worked, maybe we can turn the corner. I don't know. What do you think? I know
I
we're out of
I
time too. I
I
don't want to
think that
honor that.
we can I think we can turn the corner, but I think that when people talk about reforming systems, they miss the fact that the system is the problem. The
Correct.
system,
Correct.
it's not what kind of system it is, it's that it's a system. The problem, I mean, when you talk about managed care, you can think about public health. You can think about the public school system. You can think about your like what do you see when you go into a hospital these days? What does
Yeah.
healthcare look like?
Or just
Um,
.gov broadly, the
what is it?
DMV.
Yeah, university. All of it is it's bureaucracy, which is the prioritization of efficiency and categorization and expedience over the individual. So it's
Correct.
all like this goes back to Daryl Wing Sue, this goes back to collectivism. You can talk about a low trust society, whatever. But basically, what you're talking about is the centralization of power and the mass administration of services or of it's crowd control. We live in a crowd control society. And so you can try to back engineer the right legalistic languages and frameworks to try to make this thing more humane, but it cannot be more humane when it
By
exists in
design.
an efficient system. It's just, yeah, by design. So I think that if people mount a challenge to this, it's going to be in their ones and twos.
Yep.
And it's going to be in their small groups and their small communities. The minute something becomes an org, it's starting to lose its soul. And I think that that sounds metaphorical, but I mean that quite literally.
It's Pornell's iron law of bureaucracy says that the further away you get from the ground level cause that got you into the bureaucracy in the first place, the more you lose touch with it, and you forget why you got into it in the first place.
Right.
Pournelle is
Oh,
Pornell's iron law
that's
of
cool. I
bureaucracy.
have not heard of
Um,
him or of that.
yeah, it's an interesting concept, but just to put a fine touch on this real quick, the I think you're describing something that's I should figure out how to describe this. The bureaucratic nature of this is the ego. And I don't mean ego as in like defensiveness necessarily, but the comfortable, predictable, home easy homeostasis to which everybody
Hmm.
defaults because there's a reward structure inside
Well, it's
in that
safer.
bureaucracy, correct, that incentivizes the perpetuation of the employees within the bureaucracy. They're not bad people. You know, I'm
No.
thinking of like some of my good friends who work for Nevada Medicaid, for example. They're just doing their job, but they're trapped by the system, and literally one cubicle over, they don't know what the colleague next to him is really doing because it's just too bogged down, right? But that's what they know, that's what they do, that's the way it's always been, and it's just easier. So I think we have a collective ego in society that's obfuscating the deeper true self, the essence of humans, and we're losing it, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you. The ones and twos thing is interesting because it reminded
Uh,
me of my DJ here. So it's like
oh, really? Oh, and a
DJ
one
Leslie on the
and a
ones and
two.
twos.
Yeah.
Yeah, one and a two. So,
Yeah,
um,
I think
yeah,
we're just gonna it I don't see that really changing. I used to think of
yeah.
myself as kind of a reformer, but now I don't really know
I think
that
it's
I
possibly.
even want to reform. I just want to do the best I can for I'd love to create something good. I love my work, my coaching work. I have developed a really nice thing with Solid Ground. I've also developed, like you mentioned, Open Therapy Institute. I host a case consult group for them 3 times a month and try to support people doing good work where I find them and try to have a good life. But I don't know about reforming a system because I think that the system is kind of the Borg.
Can't fight
And
City Hall.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think we can just have more conversations and personal autonomy
Yeah,
as people come into their own sense of freedom and power and resist because that as that bureaucratic cog in the wheel, you might be a good person, but it's a kind of a giant Milgram experiment at the end of the
yes, it
day.
is.
You're just kind of
Yes, it is.
perpetuating something. Anyway, we could go on,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
This has been great. Again, I want to respect you. How do people reach you?
So my website is theradicalcenterconsulting.com. Solid Ground is on Substack at Solid Ground Support. You can also check out my YouTube channel. It's The Radical Center. And yeah, that was meant ironically when I named it, and it becomes more relevant all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, check out those videos if you're interested. We're on YouTube. We're also on Spotify and Apple and all the other ones.
The Radical Center does sound like a mathematician's institute, however. I'm picturing like, a square root in the middle of a circle or something. It's like the Radical Center. How
Yeah,
do you calculate that?
I know.
Yeah.
That's funny.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate you and the work you're doing. And it's nice that we finally connected, even though we've overlapped for like 4 years now. All of a sudden, in the last 3 months, we've had multiple conversations. So we'll keep this going. And thank you to everybody listening. And if you like it, share it around and make somebody else's day. Leslie Elliott Boyce, thank you very much. And we'll see you soon. On behalf of our Zephyr Wellness family and the Noggin Notes family, we wish you all great mental wellness. Bye
Thanks, Jake.
bye.